Welcome back to the Lore 101 series. This is part 3. If you haven't watched part 1 or part 2, I'd go check them out first, but if you just want to learn all the great lore that I've got to say right now, by all means, stick around. Hey, if you're new here, my name is Jin, and let's get into it. Alright, from this point on in the story, I'm going to try and let you know exactly where we're at in the timeline as we move from story to story, since we're finally caught up to what's considered recorded history. But one important thing for you to know before moving forward is Azeroth's equivalent to the BC AD or BCE CE, if you prefer that one. All dates in Azeroth use BDP ADP, which stands for before the Dark Portal and after the Dark Portal. Obviously, that means the big point in time that deserves the whole switcheroo in calendar dates was the day that orcs invaded Azeroth when the Dark Portal first opened. And one more quick point of clarification that's important to keep in mind. After the Titans ordered Azeroth, there was just one giant landmass, or at least that's what the Titans said in their little book. But that's obviously not 100% true, since we have a lore book wreckage analysis report found in-game that talks about another landmass named Avaloran, right? Crashing against the shores and things like that, so we know there's more than just the one. Like I said, take this map with a big old grain of salt. This Pangea-like continent was named Kalimdor, which in the Titan language means Land of Eternal Starlight. And conveniently, it's also the Night Elven language Darnassian too. Weird how that works. Now, with all that in mind, today's story takes place between 16,000 and 15,000 BDP. And delightfully contains our very first Xal'atath spotting. So, what's actually going on now? For generations, life has been evolving across Azeroth, especially along the banks of the Well of Eternity. The arcane energy of that lake is really accelerating the cycles of growth. It's just taking off. Gangbusters, it's great out there. And there's even sentient beings that eventually evolved from the primitive life. Some of the first and most prolific of these were the Trolls. They primarily lived in the forests and jungles as hunter-gatherers. And not only were they rather strong and agile, they also regrow lost limbs, just like so. Kind of weird that Zul'jin didn't, but we'll get to that later. The many different groups of trolls developed different cultures and customs, but all trolls shared one thing: their common religion that revolved around worship of the wild gods, or as they called them, Loa. Now, real quick for context, wild gods are primal manifestations of life and nature found on both Azeroth and the Emerald Dream. The wild gods are creatures in two realms because, for one, they inhabit the physical world, but their spirits are bound to the Emerald Dream. Kind of cool how it works. It's like, I'm gonna go back and forth. Anyway, trolls called them Loa, like I already said, and they totally worshiped them as deities. And Loa is actually a more inclusive word than wild god, as trolls classify any creature with sufficient power as a Loa, and not just the giant wolves and the like. Yeah, like the bears and the wolves. Well, they're like the little things, even wisps, like Night Elf wisps, if you know that. That's considered a Loa to a troll. Now, real quick, due to their worship of the Loa, the trolls tended to gather near a series of peaks and plateaus in southern Kalimdor where the wild gods hung out. This was the home to many of the Loa, and they named this holy mountain Zandalar. Probably figured that's what they were calling it, right? Among the different tribes, the Zandalari were the most powerful. They built temples and shrines all over the mountains, and in time, these grew into a massive temple city known as Zuldazar. Zandalar obviously wasn't the only tribe either, and eventually, some of the tribes attempted to challenge him in some of their territorial power. Most notably were the Gurubashi, Amani, and Drakari. Now the trolls, they're really skilled warriors on both sides, so the tribes tended to avoid conflict when possible. It's like, they could kick my ass, but I could kick their ass. Why? I don't know, it's a fair fight. I don't want to get into a fair fight. Why would I get into a fair fight? That's dumb. So they just kind of avoided each other, because untouched lands were plentiful in all directions, and it wound up being easier just to spread out. Now, all land was open to them, except the witch doctors and the priests of the different tribes forbid everyone from interacting with a little mound of blackened stones at the base of the Zandalari Mountains. However, someone found a dagger that really liked to talk to them, and convinced them to do some really questionable crap. His name was Zando, and he was an ambitious little witch doctor, hailing from the Gurubashi tribe. His rivals had ousted him for a position of power, and he spent his days nursing dreams of revenge. He at some point came to possession of the dagger Xal'atath. Hey, here she is! It's Xal'atath, everyone. Which easily latched onto Zando's anger and twisted him into a pawn. Guided by the dagger's whisper, Zando and a handful of loyal witch doctors went to track down the forbidden Black Mountain. The little mound. Blech. Well, Zando and his followers soon discovered that the mound was actually the body of Kithix that had ran off after Tyr nearly kicked the... Well, Tyr did kick the crap out of him, but Tyr didn't kill him. Anyway, Zaltath urged Zando to make a blood sacrifice to the creature. It's freaking Zaltath's always like, I need blood. Right, that's what she does. Well, the troll dismembered some of his companions with the dagger, used their blood and organs to awaken the creature, and finally buried Zalatath in Kithix's hide, causing the creature to rumble to life. Yeah. Pretty sure you shadow priests. Crazy. Anyway, Xander and his followers were never seen again, obviously. He woke up a friggin' Cathraxi. Trolls who later visited the site found only scattered bones picked clean. Poor guy. Now that Kithix was awake again, he looked around at the Troll Empire and thought, Black Empire was way better than this crap. Stupid Titans ruining everything. Well, rather than attack the city alone, he searched for creatures that he could control. He's like, I need a posse. Let's get me a posse. He found one. He found one in the Akir, right? And the Akir are the insectoid creatures created by the old gods. Now, Kithix rallied the swarm and attacked the trolls, destroying smaller settlements in its path towards Zoldazar. The Zandalari called out to the others and united the different tribes under the Zandalari. They're like, come on, get out of here. We gotta kill the freaking old god thing. It caused the trouble. So yeah, they all showed up, and it was great. Because even the wild gods on low joined in the fight against the Akir, because, well, everyone hates bugs. Ugh. Even entomologists are like, yeah, they're kind of gross. Pretty gross. Well, eventually the Akir were forced to retreat before they could make it to the Zandalar Mountains. Woo! Go trolls. The trolls knew they couldn't just let the insectoids retreat, though, because, again, everyone hates bugs. They're the worst. They would need to ensure that they're always kept in check. So, what'd they do? Well, the different tribes agreed to follow the Akir and establish themselves near the Akir to always keep an eye on them. They're like, we're just gonna, follow them until they stop, and we're just gonna oppress the crap out of them. That's what they did. So where did the Jakari go? Well, the Jakari headed up north. The Gurubashi encountered the corrupted Anubisath in the southwest. They struggled to fight back the Akir as one massive army. Now, the Zandalari instructed them to break up into smaller groups and use guerrilla tactics. This eventually worked, and they were able to keep the Akir in check, but never truly defeated them. It was the Mani that actually set out to take down Kithix. They tracked down the Cathraxi through the jungles to the north. When they finally did attack, the entire tribe launched themselves in a desperate attack against Kithix and its insectoid minions. And even though a small number of the Amani survived, they emerged from the battle victorious. Yeah, the Amani really are that badass. Now, after centuries of fighting the Akir, the trolls eventually shattered their empire. The only remaining remnants of the Akir were trapped in the far north and far south of Azeroth. Central Kalimdor was permanently scoured of their presence. Thank you, trolls. We appreciate you. Now, over the generations, the Akir evolved into separate species. In the north, near the Vault of Yogg-Saron, the Nerubians created a vast underground kingdom. Yeah, so they all spawned probably from the north and then made their ways down south. Okay, Nerubians, good job. Cool. Now, in the southwest were the Karaji, gathered near the prison complex of Cthulhu. And Lithis, Now, in the southeast are the Mantid, congregated where Yasharaz's essence still polluted the place. Really quick on that, when they ripped out Yasharaj, wasn't a clean pull. Lots of little bits went everywhere. More on that later. Now, obviously, without the war against the Akir to bind the tribes together, the trolls actually became more distant over generations. See, the different tribes grew in strength, and some even created empires of their own. And even though the Zandalari receded into their mountain plateaus, they would always have a strong influence over the other tribes. One group, the Akir, went south. They settled beneath the roots of the Kapari trees. These are the really big-ass, little amber bleedy trees. If you're playing Remix right now, you know what I'm talking about. No, these Akir did not see a point in continuing a war when they couldn't win. This was unusual for insectoids, but they were in fact pretty smart bugs. Well, they still worshipped the old gods and believed they would one day break free of their prisons and rule over Azeroth again. They believed that they could serve their old god masters better by honing their skills rather than just throwing themselves against impossible odds. Now, the Empress was the figurehead of this Mantid race, and the normal worker drones practically worshipped the queen. The overall destiny of the Mantid wasn't controlled by the Queen, it was actually the Klaxi, or the priest class. Right? They were like the religious order among them. And the Klaxi, they didn't turn their attentions and vengeance on the trolls. In fact, they didn't really care. They were looking elsewhere. Now, there was something off in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms that they really, really had their eye on. Something was calling to them. And they didn't really know what it was, but they had to have it. Kind of like Golem, the Precious, kind of like that. They had to have it. So what was that? Well, quite a while ago when old Rawden, or, I Keep a Raw, when he traveled south, one of the things that he came across was the heart of Yasraj. Again, old god pulled out of the ground. Well, he put that into a big old vault and buried it on the ground, and, well, there was still enough of the nasty, voidy stuff radiated out in the world. Like a little radiation or something. I don't know, void radiation. And the Mantid could, smell it. And they really wanted it. They really wanted it. They didn't even know what it was, but they had to have it. So, the Mantid launched a surprise attack against the Mogu that had been guarding the Vale for, well, basically since they got there. And they almost beat him. They almost got him. But no, the Mogu kicked the crap out of him. The Mantid, though, they were like, you know what? You don't just fail and fail. Failure is actually a learning opportunity. That's how they took it. They're like, every single failure, we're going to review the game tapes, and we're going to get better. All right? So, it's a learning experience. That's what they did. So what did the survivors of the battle do? They like I said, they're looking at the game tapes, they're going over all the plans, and they're like, we are going to hone our skills, and we're going to be better. So, 100 years later, I guess these bugs are really old or something. They'll live a long time. So yeah, 100 years later, the Mantid struck again, thus starting the Mantid cycle. Every 100 years, the Mantid would attack the Vale and attempt to capture the heart of Yasharaj. And, well, the Mogu kind of got sick of their shit and launched an attack against the Mantid homeland. Mantaveth is the name of it. Well, this was really a bad time for the Mantid, but the Mogu didn't check with them first, and they just attacked anyways. I don't think the Mantid had checked with them the first time, but eventually the Mogu got used to 100 years, attack them 100 years, attack. Yeah, well. So, what happened? The Mantid were actually on the verge of annihilation until a single Mantid led the charge against the Mogu, and this Mantid was named Corvin. Not Corvin Dallas, but, it'd be cool if it was. Anyway, Corvin was able to lead this little ragtag team of Mantid to victory over the Mogu and save the day. Woo! Klaxi announced that Corvin would become the Paragon among the Mantid. But just being named a Paragon wasn't enough for Corvin. He saw the Mantid's potential as long as he could be there to save them in the darkest hour. So, Corvin experimented with the sap of the Kapari trees until he perfected a stasis chamber where the Mantid could be kept alive within it for generations. So he locked himself inside this amber stasis cocoon with the instructions to the Klaxi. Only awaken him when the Mantid are under great distress. So, awaken Paragon in case of emergency. I like that. Now, at this point, he had been named Corvin Prime, the first Paragon, the first of many, and again, he planned to remix. He met a whole bunch of them. Alright, let's go see what's going on with the Mogu. Well, the Mogu hadn't seen Raw in a good 1,000 years or more. But that was fine. They still needed to watch over the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. And then the Curse of Flesh came. Just like it hit pretty much every race, I keep saying, oh, hit them hard, hit them hard. Yeah, it'll hit them hard too. And this is the first time they had to face anything like mortality, and Mogu kinda got angry. Alright, well, so what happened? The tiniest disagreement would explode into an all-out conflict between the different clans that emerged after the Curse of Flesh took hold. The only thing that kept the Mogu from completely destroying themselves was the Mantid cycle. So, I guess it's kind of a good thing? Because every 100 years the Mogu would work together to drive back the Mantid, then 99 years of trying to kill each other. Then 1 year of stopping the Mantid, then 99 of killing it, whatever. So, the age of turmoil among the Mogu became known as the Age of 100 Kings. Now, while the factions continued to war, more life started to spring up all over the place, just like the Trolls did. And the smartest of them that were popping up around this area, there was obviously the Panderan. Now, also in this area, there were 4 wild gods, known as the Aga Celestials by the Panderan, who thought those big old chonkers were pretty great. And they were. Now, those Aga Celestials were Zuen, the white tiger, Yulon, the jade serpent, Chiji, the red crane, and Niazao, the black ox. The Celestials taught the pandas some good shit like philosophy and stuff. It's wonderful. But all that was about to come to an end when Lei Shen showed up. Around this time, life was popping up and prospering around the Vale while the Mogu kept going at each other's throats. And this is when a warrior named Lei Shen made a name for himself. So, who is this guy? Who's Lei Shen? Well, Lei Shen was the son of a minor warlord, so he was used to the whole constant conflict, but thought it was pretty dumb. Oh, really stupid, actually. In fact, he believed that the Mogu were wasting their potential. So eventually his father was, taken out. And honestly, rather than seeking revenge on whoever did that, he actually goes into exile to try and figure out what should be done. And eventually he comes to the end of his own logic and reasoning, and he's like, okay, I need some help. I'm going to find the missing Highkeeper Ra. And honestly, around this time, the Mogu had started calling Highkeeper Ra Ra-Den, or Master Ra in their language. Most Mogu didn't even believe he was still alive, but Lei Shen thought all the trials that the Mogu were going through right now was a test, and Ra-Den has a master plan. No. He knows what he's doing. This is all test. He's testing us. Alright. After searching for years, Lei Shen found Ra-Den deep in a hidden vault beneath the veil. Hey, he found him. There he is. He's down there. What did he look like? So he walks in there, and he's like, oh man, Master Ra, what's going on? Well, Ra-Den was just actually sitting quietly in the darkness, and he didn't even seem to take notice of Lei Shen even approaching him. In fact, he didn't even respond to him when Lei Shen tried to ask about the Moku's true purpose. He's like, dude, I know you got a plan for us. What is it? Let me know. He's like, Tony silence. Nothing. And finally, weeks of trying to get information out of Lei Shen finally pushed him to a breaking point. He realized that Ra-Den was not meditating, or contemplating, or anything. There was no plan. He had simply given up. And Lei Shen he went off on him. He's like, you suck. I hate you. Why would you do this to us? After he kind of like let loose, Ra finally kind of came to. He's like, all right, you wanna know what's going on? You wanna see what's actually happening? Ra took Lei Shen up to the top of a nearby thundering mountain, where unending storms roared across the sky. Yeah, it's got lightning everywhere. Now, inside this mountainside, Ra took Lei Shen into a massive ornate vault, where he summoned the lingering power of Aman'Thul and showed Lei Shen the answer to what he was looking for. The Titans of the Pantheon were dead, murdered by one of their own. And their final hope was a planet of Azeroth itself, but it was already infested with the creatures of the void. That sucks. So, Ra figured Lei Shen would have reacted similarly to how Ra himself acted, but that was not the case. No, Lei Shen caught Ra off guard and just bitch slapped him. In fact, he imprisoned Ra-Den within the vault in the Thundering Mountain. He then stole the power of not just Ra-Den, but of Aman'Thul himself. Lei Shen came down from the mountain, and the Mogu were already gossiping about how amazing he was. Some thought he ate a Titan's heart. Others thought he found some unknown power. And there was one thing that all the stories had in common, though. The Thunder King had come to unite the Mogu clans and conquer Kalimdor. Now, Lei Shen set out to establish a new destiny for the Mogu. They would be the keepers of the world soul and masters of all of Azeroth. The petty little infighting was no longer going to be tolerated. No more. Bye-bye. Lei Shen even mastered the tools of the Titan Keepers, thanks to his new knowledge given to him by capturing the essence of Aman'Thul. One of the machines he mastered was the Engine of Nalak Shah, basically a mini Forge of Wills. So, with the Engine of Nalak Shah, they were able to shape new creatures as well as discover a cure for the curse of flesh among themselves. Way to go, Lei Shen. In fact, life was pretty damn good for the Mogu at this point in time. But if you were a Panderan, life's about to get real terrible. That bad. Because the Pandarans saw what was coming and fled to the region known as the Kunlai Summit. Here they sought the protection of Zuen, the White Tiger, but Lei Shen brought his armies to the summit and challenged Zuen to a duel. And it took a while, but he did in fact beat Zuen. chained him up, and forced him to watch as he imprisoned the entire Panderan race. Now, under Lei Shen's rule, the Panderan weren't allowed to learn to read or write or even speak any language other than the Mogu one. He forced the Panderan to build great monuments in the Mogu's honor, as well as build the defenses against those damned Mantid that like to attack every 100 years. This is where the serpent spine comes from. That big-ass wall that's now manned by the Panderan. Well, when the current enslaved population weren't cutting the mustard, he decided that he could 3D print some new recruits out of the engine of Nalak Shah. This is where the Grummels and the Sarok come from. Right? You ever seen the dagger in the heart scenario, how the Sarok were crafted? Yeah, it was Lei Shen that did that. Now, the Zandalari Trolls had taken a great interest in the empire that Lei Shen had built. Trolls are up there going like, I want some of that. That looks good. Now, a high priest named Zolathra led a group of trolls to the Mogu Empire and offered Lei Shen a deal. He told him that while Lei Shen and the Mogu held the power over the world, the trolls held the knowledge over it. Zolathra proposed that the Mogu and the Zandalari empires should unite, so no force on Azeroth could ever oppose them. Well, Lei Shen thought this was pretty cool. He's like, yeah, good one. Since the trolls were the first race he'd come across that didn't just want to live in peace with their environment, but to shape it to their liking, just like the Mogu did. And oddly enough, the Mogu rarely traveled outside the bounds of the Veil of Eternal Blossom. Their charge to guard the Veil was still intact to this day. Both Lei Shen and Zolathra were already plotting before they finished striking their deal, and Zolathra thought that the Zandalari would be able to steal the Mogu's godlike powers. Well, and Lei Shen also assumed that they would be eventually enslaving the Zandalari too, so not really great guys on either side, no. Alright. What crap. Anyway, both leaders kept their little schemes to themselves, and they didn't even tell their own people. Now they made large public displays with their allegiance. They're like, look at the best people, they're amazing. Yes, this is so many things. Yeah, you get the idea. They suck. Now, in exchange for the knowledge of Kalimdor that Zandalar possessed, the Mogu would train the trolls in arcane magic and even gave them a fertile plot of land near the Veil. Lei Shen even made a secret agreement with Zolathra, describing how to revive him in case anything were to ever happen to him. It's like, hey, check it out. This defibrillator over here. Just all you gotta do. Pretty sweet. I'm Thunder King. Zap zap, baby. Why didn't he tell us to any of the Mogu? Well, because he was paranoid and he didn't trust anyone, so it was I'll tell the Zandalari. Yeah. Anyway, sometime after giving the knowledge of resurrecting him to the Zandalari, Lei Shen set his sights on one other Titan facility he could use to completely remake Azeroth in his own image. And that was, in fact, the Forge of Origination. So, he sent word to the Twelver guarding the facility that the Thunder King wanted to meet with them. Well, the Twelver didn't know who Lei Shen was, but traveled to the Veil to meet with him. They were stunned to see how far the Mogu Empire had come, and how some had even reversed the Curse of Flesh that they too had been struggling with. While Lei Shen showed the Twelver the great works that he had built, they were a little taken aback by the treat of the native life, but ultimately that wasn't their concern. And really, they didn't actually react until they heard Lei Shen's plans about taking command of the Forge, and then it got real awkward when they found out what he did to Highkeeper Ra. That's when they got a little pissy. So, Lei Shen offered a place of greatness among the Mogu in exchange for the Forge, as he saw the Twelver as equals since they too were Titan Forge creations. They refused his offer and returned to the Forge of Origination. Here's where it gets really fun, folks. This is like one of my favorite bits of the lore. It's wonderful. Just strap in, okay? So, Lei Shen allowed them to leave, but warned them that he would be coming to take what was rightfully his. He was so confident that Lei Shen even invited Zolathra to witness his greatness as he took the Forge for himself. He led the forces deep into a lush jungle of the west, into the heart of Uldum. Know what you're thinking? Lush jungle? Uldum ain't no lush jungle. Was back then. Honestly, Uldum probably looked like Hawaii or Tahiti or Indonesia. You know, like one of them very tropical destinations, okay? Yeah. Well, old Lei Shen marched his forces up to the very steps of the Great Pyramid that made up the Forge of Origination, and only a small force of Twelver emerged from the pyramid to stop him. Yep, and Lei Shen laughed and mocked them because he could crush them all on his own. This was not in fact their plan, though. You see, the Tol'vir that met Lei Shen did so knowing that they were gonna... This was a bit of a sacrifice. They knew it was happening. The Tol'vir still within the pyramid had made some minor adjustments to the forge. And they turned it on. And rather than eradicating all life on Azeroth, they just eradicated all life in about a 20-mile radius. This event pretty much put an end to both empires, as neither would ever grow to such heights as they were before. And even though Lei Shen's body was recovered, there was no Zandalari left alive that knew how to revive him. Poor guy. Dang. Got killed by the Forge of Origination. Obviously, Lei Shen thought he was going to be able to take over the Forge, but the Tol'vir had other ideas. They're like, I will I'll just wipe out just here, just where you are. And then, yeah, little localized beat boot for this area. Following his death, the Mogu Empire kept on going, but it wasn't really nearly as powerful as it was under Lei Shen. Now, the last Mogu Emperor, Lao Fei, earned the title Slave Binder because he was a massive piece of shit. Alright? He would do some pretty horrible and heinous things. And one of those horrible and heinous things is he would separate children from their parents and set them up on the serpent spine during the Mantid Swarm. So, that horrible event nearly took out a Panderan named Kang. Because that's what happened to his child and his wife. They both died in the process of this asshole being an asshole. Well, Kang, Panderan, he nearly gave into the sadness and despair. But eventually his mind circled around a single question. Why? Why did the Mogu inflict such pain on the Panderan and other races? And meditating on this question, Kang realized that their cruelty wasn't a sign of their strength, but their weakness. Mogu have grown too dependent on their slaves, and without them, their empire would crumble. And in his downtime, he taught himself how to fight using his body as a weapon, since the Panderan weren't allowed to use weapons unless they were sent to the spine. He disguised his practices if he was dancing and not draw any unwanted suspicion like his way. And what was that one? I don't remember. Capoeira? Yeah, he was doing capoeira. There you go. Eventually, he taught his methods of fighting without weapons to his fellow enslaved Panderan. He actually kind of used the whole Morpheus technique by saying, "Come on, stop trying to hit me and hit me." Over time, hundreds of enslaved Panderan learned his new fighting technique, known as the Way of the Monk. Eventually, Kang relocated his followers to the Kunlai Summit to avoid any possible Mogu retaliation, since he didn't think they were ready to take on an empire yet. Now the new monks built a monastery in secrecy and continued to train. Now, up on the slopes of the summit, Kang found the imprisoned Zuen. He wasn't yet able to free the White Tiger, but he spent much of his time learning from the Wild God. And Zuen taught Kang about inner strength and all that good stuff. And Kang passed this along to the monk followers, and they knew they were ready. So, Kang and his monk followers' first victory was at the Mogu Shan Vaults. They successfully cut the Mogu off from the engine of Nalak Shah. This deprived them from their 3D printing machinations. This victory also drew attention to the other races beaten down by the Mogu. There was the Hosen, the Jinyu, Grummels, and even the Yongle joined the rebellion. Kang's belief that the Mogu had grown too dependent on their enslaved population proved to be true. And as more enslaved people defected, the easier their victories came. The empire quickly fell into chaos. The Grummels worked to cut off the Mogu supply lines and trade networks, and the Yongle led raiding parties in the northwest, and the Hosen dug tunnels to infiltrate the Mogu strongholds. And the Jinyu did some magic shit to tell Kang where to be and whatnot, and I don't know, water thing. Oh, I see stuff in the water. Yeah, the Jinyu. Eventually, the Mogu were forced to retreat back to only the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. And the Veil could sustain the Mogu for as long as they desired, so Kang led an attack on the capital itself. And in typical fantasy tropes, Kang fought the Emperor himself and wound up winning, but lost his own life in the process. Good job, Kang. Now, Kang had succeeded in toppling the Mogu Empire, but just like Moses, he didn't get to see the Promised Land. Now the Panderan were pumped up on the victory, and they were just about to go hunt down the remaining Mogu as payback for generations of enslavement. But someone named Song, one of Kang's earliest students, said, no, we ain't not doing that. Song told the Panderan that revenge was, well, stupid. And he needed to stick to Kang's teachings of true justice, criminal reform, and cutting down on recidivism. You see, Kang believed in reforming criminal offenders, not just punishing offenders, as restitution for society. Song spent the rest of his life traveling around the fallen empire and teaching all of this good stuff to the Panderan. Yeah, like, slow down, all that good stuff. We love it. Song eventually became known as the first lore walker. And the lore walkers were the historians and philosophy majors of the Panderan society. They argued day and night about consequentialism versus deontology. And Song also hoped that his teachings would combat the power of the Shah. Who were the Shah, you might think? Well, if you're playing Remix, you know, but let me quickly explain. All those nasty bits from Yashara? Yeah, and he had like 7 heads or something like that. Anyway, nasty stuff. It's all the bad bits of Yashara that has shown up as negative emotions. And eventually, a new empire of the Panderan rose in the Vale. One based on all these good vibes and hippie stuff and just peace and love, baby. Peace and love. Now it's time to get into what's going on with the Yongle. Now, I mentioned the Yongle a little bit. Well, the Yongle were a race of cow-like people. Well, they'd been a nomadic race that liked to hang out with the wild god Cenarius. And Cenarius, like I said, he's a wild god, and he kind of looked like a weird centaur, and he thought the Yongle were pretty cool, and he just wanted to see them flourish. Now, one of the Mogu emperors thought that the Yongle were pretty awesome, and he wanted to enslave them. But eventually, they won their freedom alongside the Panderan, as we said, with Kang. And really sadly, under the Mogu rule, the Yongle lost a lot of its traditions and cultures, as they weren't permitted to speak of their old heritage. Many Yongle clung to the old ways as best as possible, while the others felt it in their destiny to forge a new path for their race. Now, this disagreement between the two viewpoints often led to violence. Most Yongle despised the violence and journeyed north until they hit the Storm Peaks. And those Yongle eventually became the Tonka of Northrend. Other tribes settled in the more temporal central Kalimdor, and these would eventually become the Tauren of Mulgore. This group of Yongle eventually reconnected with Cenarius and learned both Druidism and Shamanism. Not all the Yongle left the Vale, though, but found themselves at odds with the Panderan. They eventually settled beyond the Serpent Spine, putting themselves in harm's way every 100 years. And finally, we're going to be talking about the Zandalari invasion, which happened 11,900 years BDP. Well, following Leishen's death, the Zandalari kept their distance from the Mogu. The Trolls saw the constant quarreling between the clans as pretty useless land. They're just like, why would I get involved with that? They suck. And when it became clear that no Mogu would ever assert the same dominance over the Mogu Empire that Lei Shen did, they pretty much broke all ties with them. Now, one thing that the Zandalari never forgot about was the area of land that they had been promised to them by Lei Shen. After the Mogu Empire crumbled, they debated within Zuldazar if they should seek to take what they had viewed as theirs by force or through diplomacy. Now, in fact, it was a descendant of that high priest Zolathra that made the most compelling argument. His name was Mengazi. And Mengazi argued that since the Panderan were able to overthrow their masters, they would be able to defend themselves if given enough warning. He also believed that since it was Lei Shen that promised the land of the Zandalari, the Panderan would likely not recognize that deal. They're like, you didn't get a contract. No, it's our land. Get out. So, Mengazi proposed striking against the Panderan without warning to ensure their victory. Now, the Zandalari marched south to the fertile region north of the Kunlun summit. There, they were met with no more than a few farmers to defend their land against these invading trolls, many riding dinosaurs. That's pretty sweet. Trolls riding dinosaurs. That's great. So the trolls pushed the Panderan out of the region and began pushing into the Jade Forest. Word got out of the invasion and panic gripped the Panderan. The Panderan had no standing army, and no one felt the need to carry on any militaristic traditions. The Panderan had spent their time since the Mogu Empire fell studying philosophy and living in peace and harmony, and it was great, honestly. It was beautiful. Now, the only existing fighting force were the Panderan charged with watching the Serpent Spine during the Mantan invasion. Now, the monks on the wall rushed to defend the land, but they had no way of countering these trolls flying around on pterodactyls and crap. Well, ultimately the Panderan were saved by Zhang, a young Panderan that spent much of her early life tending the Cloud Serpents. The Panderan used to believe that the Cloud Serpents were completely untamable, but Zhang was able to befriend one when she nursed a young back to health many years before the invasion. Now, as the monks fought a losing battle against these mounted trolls, Zhang flew into battle on the back of her Cloud Serpent, Lo. Zhang and Lo caught the trolls off guard, and they were able to force them into retreat. News of their victory spread throughout the Empire as they followed Jiang by taming their own cloud serpents. The small army of mounted Panderan became known as the Order of the Cloud Serpent. I'm exalted with them. Yeah. It was actually these serpent riders that began to shift the tide of war. Benghazi actually saw that the Zandalari might lose the war now that these serpent riders had joined the fight, so he pulled out all the stops. Benghazi journeyed to the Tomb of the Conquerors where Lei Shen's body had been buried. And he started to try and resurrect the Thunder King. I don't know how. Maybe he figured it out. I don't know. Because it says everyone that knew how to do it died at the Forge of Origination and figured it out. Whatever. It doesn't matter. He tried to resurrect the Thunder King. He didn't do it. Because what happened was Jiang made one final desperate attack against the Zandalari, and in classic fantasy tropes, she sacrificed herself in the battle with Benghazi. Her desperate attempt at stopping Benghazi was a success, just like when Kang killed the Mogu Emperor. Wow. There you go. And the Order of the Cloud Serpents were in fact super sad, but they would keep Jiang's teaching alive for a long time so us players could get some pretty awesome mounts, as long as you get that rep, baby. I do. Very nice. I don't know if you still have to get it, but whatever. Well, that's actually where we're going to be ending this bit. Don't worry, next time we're going to be covering everyone's favorite topic. How a trio of time travelers helped some crazy night elves caught in a love triangle blow up most of the world. That's right, we're going to be talking the War of the Ancients. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and click that beautiful little subscribe button. You don't even want to. It's right there. Give it a click. And in fact, you can even tell me what I got wrong in this whole thing down in the comments. Seriously, comment. The YouTube algorithm is watching. And if you want to hear more lore talking from me, you can check out the podcast I do with my co-host Ali, Live Laugh Lore. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. You just recorded a great one today. I think you're going to love it. And with that, I will see you next time.